Okay, let's pull. What's up, I'm Jim Fro, and this is the Ready Check Pull Guide for Rygelon. Big shout out to our Patreon supporters who help make these videos possible. Rygelon is one of two bosses that you can go to right after Anduin, and it's a mostly single target fight with two alternating phases. In phase 1, you nuke Rygelon while killing some little ads before they get to the boss, and in phase 2, you just keep nuking Rygelon with nothing much going on unless it's on heroic, where you have to survive a ton of raid damage. There's a hardened rage after the 4th phase 1, so boss damage is a big priority. Alright, let's go over phase 1. First things first, you absolutely cannot let the ads get to the boss. There are 6 Quasar ads that spawn in set locations around the room that don't do anything but move towards the boss and give him a huge buff if they get to him. Keep the boss toward the edge of the room in between 2 of the 6 spawn points and kill the Quasars before they get to him. All forms of CC work on the ads, so be ready to use whatever you have if they get too close to the boss. There's 2 waves of Quasars in phase 1, so that's 12 ads to kill per phase. Second, you can't let the black and white debuffs expire in the normal realm. A short debuff called Dark Eclipse goes out on a couple of players every few seconds, which explodes on the raid for a ton of damage when it expires. This damage is massively reduced if each debuff player steps into a pool on the ground that the Quasars leave behind when they die, which also puts the player into a different realm for a few seconds. On Heroic, each pool can only be used by one player, so the debuff players need to be super aware of which Quasar pools they can use ahead of time. You get 10 of these debuffs per phase, so there's 2 leftover pools if things get messy. Third, tanks need to taunt swap after every cast of Corrupted Strikes, and mitigate as much of its initial damage as possible. The cast does a bunch of physical and magical damage and leaves a dot on the tank based on how much damage was taken. Now fourth, you have to kill an unstable matter ad right before Rygelon reaches full energy. When he reaches full energy, he starts casting Massive Bang, which pulls everyone toward the middle of the room and one-shots the entire raid unless they're in the safe zone provided by killing one of the 3 unstable matter ads around the room. However, it's super important that you wait to kill an unstable matter ad until right before Rygelon's cast, or else it'll heal itself after a few seconds. When you time it right, everyone needs to step into one of the little circles that spawn on the ground around the edge of the room, with only one person per circle. These circles protect you from the massive bang damage and then put you into the phase 2 realm. Fifth is only for heroic. You have to soak the damage from the blue orbs that fall on the ground. When an orb spawns, it blasts the closest player for a ton of damage over a couple seconds. You simply need to have one player soak each orb with an immunity or a big damage reduction cooldown. They just need to be the closest player to the orb while everyone else moves away because the orb does do splash damage, and 2 of these spawn per phase 1. Okay, moving on to phase 2, not much happens on normal difficulty other than ramping dot damage on the raid, but on heroic, the raid has to soak a ton of damage from these 2 unstable core ads. Everyone should quickly stack on top of the closest core to the boss while continuing to DPS Rygelon. The core pulses a ton of damage to nearby players, but any damage that it does gets reflected back to it, and that's the only way to do damage to these cores. Once the first core is dead, it starts a short cast that puts a small circle around itself and then does a massive amount of physical damage to anyone in the circle. One of your tanks has to soak this damage with a big defensive cooldown, or else it one-shots the entire raid. Everyone should move over to stack on the second core while the tank is doing this. Soak the damage from the second core and do another tank soak after it dies. If the cores aren't dead by the time Rygelon runs out of energy and finishes his cast, they just one-shot the raid. So it's really important to have everyone stack on the cores as quickly as possible and dedicate big raid cooldowns to be able to live through the crazy amount of damage they do. And finally, make sure to relocate the boss after each phase 2 so that he's closer to the next unstable matter ad you want to kill, but also between the Quasar spawn points. And that's pretty much it. Here's a quick recap of the fight for you to review or screenshot for later. Our Patreon supporters get these guides early, so if you're interested in that, check out the links below. Peace.